So what we're going to do this morning, and I'm going to dispense with the rest of the pleasantries, and I'm just going to get right into this because I've got a lot of ground I want to cover, and we've got a little bit of a time crunch this morning. And this is intended to kind of set up what we're going to discuss tonight. And what we're going to deal with tonight is, well, we're going to talk about things that you're not supposed to talk about in public. You know, you're not supposed to talk religion and politics in public, you know? But in my line of work, that kind of leaves everything out. And so we're going to discuss some of these things, but we need to discuss principles in the Word first. And if you were here with me yesterday afternoon, you remember that if you want to understand the end, you must first understand the beginning. And as we were looking at the beginning, not just as a record of something that happened in the historical past, yes, it is that, but it is also telling a story of today, and it's telling the story of the future, because in Isaiah 46, verses 8, 9, and 10, the Creator says, I'm the Lord, declaring the end from the beginning, meaning that the beginning, or the story of the beginning, actually tells the story of the end. It doesn't predict the end, it tells the story of the end. And so we were discussing yesterday in Deuteronomy how that Israel was to be in a particular place. They were to keep His instructions, commandments, and by being in that particular place and doing what they were designed to do, they would function in their purpose, that is to be a light to the nations. And as they're going into the land, you'll recall that there were three nations that they were not to meddle with: Edom, Moab, and the children of Ammon. And I suggested to you that in part the reason he tells them this is because there were people there in Edom, in Moab, and of the children of Ammon that Israel was to be a light to, so that there would be those coming out of darkness into that light, an example being Ruth, who was from Moab. But what we didn't get into yesterday afternoon, and what we're going to start to get into today and this evening, is another reason the Creator probably told them not to mess with Edom, Moab, and Ammon is because if they were being a light, that would draw these people to that light. But what happened when Israel wasn't where they were supposed to be, doing what they were supposed to be doing? Who were some of the very nations that would rise up and start harassing Israel? Edom, Moab, and the children of Ammon. So the way it seems, anyway, the way the Creator designed things is that Israel would be living right next door to people that they were supposed to be a light to. But when Israel started acting like those people started harassing Israel. They were literally a thorn in their side. When Adam was told after he fell, after eating the mingled fruit, that from now on the ground is going to produce thorns and thistles, in the Hebrew language, there is a link between the idea of thorns and thistles and Esau. In other words, Esau is someone you're to be a light to, but when you start acting like Esau, then Esau is going to be literally a thorn in your side. So what we're going to talk about now is Esau. We're going to go to Genesis chapter 25, and I'm going to have to kind of speak rapidly to cover all the points that we want to get in this morning so that we won't have to take up all the time tonight to do that. But in Genesis chapter 25, for the sake of time, we won't read this. I'll just kind of condense the story. Isaac is married to a woman named Rebekah, and she's barren. And as a matter of fact, she's barren for 20 years. Now that's an important point because Isaac is the one who is supposed to propagate this covenant that God has made with Abraham. And Abraham was told, in Isaac shall your seed be called. And so if Abraham is going to be the father of many nations and is going to go through Isaac, and if Isaac's married to a woman who is barren, we've got a problem. So it says that Isaac interceded on behalf of Rebekah, and she conceived, and she's 20 years barren, ladies, 20 years barren. And then she conceives, she realizes she's pregnant, and at that point she should have been overjoyed, shouldn't she? She should have been so happy, but what does it tell us? That she's troubled because she realizes that there's something going on within her. And she goes to inquire of the Lord, and this is what the Lord tells her. 2 nations are growing in your womb. Let's read it actually. Two nations, verse 23 of chapter 25. Two nations are in your womb. Two peoples shall be separated from your body. One people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. So what she's told is this struggle that you're sensing inside of you, it's not just two babies. It's two nations. I want to use this term. Think of it this way, two natures. When you and I were born again of the incorruptible seed that is the Messiah, and we thought everything was going to be smooth sailing from here on out, right? But what did we discover was going on within us every day? A struggle. There's a struggle going on within us, isn't there? And when we first came into this world, what kind of a nature did we come into this world with? A carnal nature. But we were born again of that incorruptible seed, right? But every day, what do we have to do? We have to crucify the flesh. So she senses that there's a struggle going on within her, and the Creator's saying, yeah, there are two nations, and they're two natures, that's my word, struggling within you. And presumably, what are they struggling over? Who's going to be born first? Who's going to obtain the birthright? Who's going to obtain the blessing? So that's probably what they're struggling over. But he goes on and he tells her that they're going to be separated from your body. They're not going to get along. As a matter of fact, they're not intended to get along. They're not intended to coexist. One will be stronger than the other. What that is to say is they're not going to rule the family side by side. One is always going to be lording over the other. And if the other who is weaker begins to grow stronger, that means the one who is stronger is going to grow weaker. One or the other will lord over the one. They can't coexist. But in the end, the older shall serve the younger. And so throughout this struggle, whoever's on top, it may change through time, but at the end, the older one is going to serve the younger one. He will be subservient to him. So that's the prophecy. Now, I want you, as we go through this, to consider that this is not just talking about two people who lived thousands of years ago, because the end is declared by the beginning. So it says, verse 24, so when her days were fulfilled for her to give birth, indeed, there were twins in her womb, and the first came out, I'm going to throw a Hebrew term out at you, admoni, red. Now, do we have any Hebrew students in here? Any? 1, 2, and a half. I got news for you, all the rest of you. When you're getting into the kingdom, we're not speaking English, I'm sorry. I got a sneaky suspicion when the Messiah greets every one of us, he's going to say, Shalom. Manishma. So anyway, in Hebrew it says admoni. And the root of this word is dam. Dam is the Hebrew word for blood. And with the word blood, if we add another letter, it becomes Adam. Or we would say Adam. So if you take the word for blood and you add the letter Aleph, which by the way represents the Creator because he's the master, the Aluf, and so the Aleph represents the Aluf, the master. You put that with the word blood, you get Adam or Adam, because when he breathed the breath of life into him and he became a living nephesh, he became a living soul, right? Leviticus 17:11 says that the life of all flesh is in the blood. So if he breathed the breath of life into him, and the life of all flesh is in the blood, then inherent in that statement is that when God breathed into his nostrils, not only did he put air into his lungs, but he also put blood into that lifeless form. Where did Adam get his blood from? So Dam, blood, is related to Adam. Adam, man, mankind. There's another related term, Adamah. Adamah, we just add another Hebrew letter to that. And Adamah means ground, dirt, the earth, because what was man formed from? The dust of the earth. So all these terms, dam, blood, Adam, man or mankind, Adamah, ground, are all related to this term admoni. Admoni, that is translated here as red. Another translation is ruddy. But what I want you to see in this is that not just is he physically reddish or ruddy, but look at it as a theological term. It's related to the idea of blood. It's related to the idea of man, or let's use this word, flesh, carnal, earthy. Because Esau represents that earthy, carnal nature. So he's red, he's admoni. But it also says this, that he was like a hairy garment all over. I want you to imagine you're Isaac. Your wife's been barren for 20 years, and now all of a sudden she's pregnant, and she goes through the pregnancy, and it comes to time for her to deliver. And so you're outside the tent pacing back and forth. The midwives are in the tent, and all of a sudden you hear that smack on his backside and that cry that baby gives, and you go, oh, my son. And then they bring your son out to you, and they put him in your arms, and you go, yeah. He's so hairy, he looks like he's wearing a coat. That would have freaked me out. There's something weird going on here. He was like a miniature man. That's the idea. But the word that's translated hairy, or like a hairy garment, by the way, it's also the word that's translated hairy goat, is se'ar. Se'ar. Sin, English, se'ar. And from that word we get this word, seir, as in Mount Seir. You ever heard that term before? That's where Edom, Esau, will live. Mount Seir. So Esau is indicative of carnal, earthy, ruddy, blood, goats, all those kinds of things. So it says then that afterward his brother came out and his hand took hold of Esau's heel. So his name was called Yaakov or Jacob. I really don't have time to spend on this, but I do want to say that I vehemently and adamantly disagree with the notion that Yaakov or Jacob means supplanter. Most times when you go to a lexicon, a concordance, or a Bible dictionary, and you look up the name Jacob or Yaakov out to the side, and this is written by Christian commentators and Jewish commentators, they'll say that Yaakov means supplanter. I wholeheartedly disagree, and here's why. Because the root term of Yaakov is akev, which is the word for heel, H-E-E-L. There is a Hebrew word or letter called yod, and yod represents a hand. So when you take the letter that represents a hand, yod, and you attach it to the word heel, it becomes Yaakov or Jacob. What does Jacob mean? Hand on heel. Now, why in the world would they call him that? Because that's what was happening as he was emerging from his mother's womb. Now, the real question, as far as I'm concerned, is why is his hand on his brother's heel? Here's my opinion. Because they're struggling in the womb. Who's going to be born first? Who's going to obtain the birthright and the blessing? And so here comes Esau, the one who's earthy, carnal, all those kinds of things. And as he's emerging from the womb, guess where his heel is? It's right over the head of the one who's coming right behind him. In other words, his heel is poised to come down potentially on the top of the head of the one who will be served by him later on. So what I'm getting at is, from the very beginning of Israel's existence, there's been that adversary that wants to destroy Israel. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, God told the serpent, I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. You will bruise his heel, but he's going to crush his head with his heel. So what has the adversary been trying to do since then? He's wanted to reverse this decision. He's wanted to take his heel and put it on the head of the righteous seed. So at the birth of Jacob, what is that little baby doing? He's putting his hand up there to shield his head from the heel of his adversary. I thought so. So anyway, it doesn't mean supplanter. Because later on we're going to see, you know who makes that accusation? That Jacob means supplanter? Esau. Esau is the accuser of his brother. So now we continue. It says that Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them, and so the boys grew, and Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, but Jacob was a mild man dwelling in tents. That is an idiomatic expression to say that Jacob was a shepherd. So get the picture. Esau's associated with the goats. Jacob's associated with the sheep. That becomes very important later on. So, but let's go back to Esau. It says that Esau was a skillful hunter. So in my mind, I'm reading this, and I'm thinking, well, I guess he was really good with a bow and arrow or a spear or whatever he used to go and hunt game. And so if that was all it was saying, it's almost like, what's the point? But when you go back and look at this in Hebrew, the term in Hebrew, skillful hunter, is Yodea Zaid. Yodea Zaid. Yodea comes from the root word yada, which means to know. And it is to have intimate knowledge of something. In fact, when it says that Adam knew his wife and she conceived, the term is yada, to have intimate knowledge of. So it says Yodea, that Esau had intimate knowledge of something. Zaid is translated hunting, but literally it means trapping. That he knew trapping. He knew how to set a snare, in other words. He is a skillful hunter. Do we have any deer hunters in this room? All right. You? Wow, I'm impressed. All right, yeah, okay. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you go deer hunting, typically you don't wait till noon to head to the woods, right? 4:30 in the morning. And why? Because it's still dark, right? Do you wear camo? Absolutely. You wear camo. You put on camo to go out in the woods. Why? Because you want to blend in with the environment. You want to go under the cover of darkness. You want to blend into the environment. Because you see, you're probably going to a spot that you've already spied out. You're just not walking randomly out there into the woods. Oh, this looks good. No, you've already picked out your spot. You've already saw signs that deer have been here. You've already put up your tree stand. You have set a snare. You may have even left something lying around. So you put your camo on because you want to blend into the environment. You walk out there under the cover of darkness, and when you go out in the woods, are you, honk, 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 hey deer, I'm here, come and get it. No, you're walking out very quietly because you don't want the prey to know they're in danger. You see, with all due respect to hunters, hunting is equivalent to deception. It is setting a snare for your prey. Blending into the environment. You don't want to tip off the prey that they are in danger. You want to make them think that everything's just like it's always been. And Esau is really good at this. Esau knows trapping. He knows how to set a snare. This is not just describing a man who lived thousands of years ago, folks. This is describing a spirit. You want to understand the end, then you need to understand the beginning. Esau is Yodeh Zayit. He knows how to set a snare. Now, in Genesis chapter 10, don't turn there, but in Genesis chapter 10, it tells us of a man by the name of Nimrod. And it says that Nimrod began to be a mighty one in the earth, and that he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. And I used to read that as a kid and wonder, what in the world does that mean? I mean, was he so good with a bow and arrow that God had to mention, you know, that Nimrod's a pretty good hunter? But then when I started learning Hebrew and I would read that text or saw that text, what it says is that Nimrod was a mighty hunter, lifnei yudhevavhe. Lifnei, literally in the face of the Lord. It's the same term that's used when Korach rose up and was in the face of Moses. So, gentlemen, when another guy gets in your face, what does that mean? He's challenging your authority. He is saying, I'm going to resist you. So when it says that Nimrod was a mighty hunter, lifnei yudhevavhe, that he was challenging his authority. You see, he began to be a mighty one upon the earth. He is the first one who's mentioned in Scripture having a kingdom. Meaning, when he began to be a mighty one upon the earth, he was becoming a king. And if you got a king and you have a kingdom, there's something else you need. Subjects. You need those who are willing to subject their will to your will. And what is he going to do? What is his will? To rebel against the Almighty. Now, I'm going to suggest to you that if somebody like a Nimrod, who is a hunter, and remember, hunting is about the art of deception, I'm going to suggest to you that Nimrod didn't gather everybody to build Babylon by saying, hey, I'm tired of his authority and his rules and his regulations. I want to rebel against him. Who's with me? It doesn't typically work that way. And so how does Nimrod go about it? How does everybody who's done this throughout history, how does Adolf Hitler get the German people to go along with his agenda? Words. Very shrewd, skillful, subtle words. As far as we know, Adolf Hitler did not take one Jewish person and put him on a cattle car to send him to Auschwitz, personally. As far as we know, he didn't take one person and put him in a gas chamber, personally. And yet he's responsible for the death of over 6 million, plus another 5 or 6 million other people he didn't like. How did he do it? Words. Skillful words. Deceptive words. He would tell the people what they wanted to hear, and when he gave them what they wanted, then he gave them what he wanted them to have. Go to Jeremiah chapter 16 very quick. Are you still with me out there? Jeremiah 16, beginning at verse 14. Therefore, behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, that it shall no more be said, the Lord lives who brought up the children of Israel from the land of Egypt. But the Lord lives who brought up the children of Israel from the land of the north and from all the lands where he had driven them. For I will bring them back into their land, which I gave to their fathers. This is a prophecy, and it has not yet come to fruition. Now, it's coming to fruition, I believe, but it has not yet come to fulfillment. And here's how I know, because in just a couple of weeks, we'll be celebrating Pesach, Passover. And when we sit around the Seder table, guess what? They're still going to be saying, the Lord lives who brought them up from the land of Egypt. They're still going to be looking back to what he did in Egypt. So there's coming a day when they will say, not that the Lord lives who brought them up out of Egypt, but the Lord lives who brought them from all the lands where he had scattered them. So that tells me this is something that's going to happen. It's futuristic. Everybody with me here? So with that in mind, verse 16 says, behold, I will send for many fishermen, says the Lord, and they shall fish them. In other words, in order to bring about His word, the fulfillment of His word, to gather all of His people from all of the nations, to bring them back into the land of their fathers. In order to do that, because He always works through people, He's going to send fishermen. When Messiah was going around the Lake of Galilee and calling His disciples, He said, "Come follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Right? So He sent fishermen out, and later on He sent them out to Judea, Samaria, to the uttermost parts of the earth. To do what? To go fishing. Now, what did they use for bait? The gospel, the good news, the word, right? And what did they find? There were some who responded, there were some who didn't respond. 2,000 years later, what are we called to be? Fishers of men. What's the bait we're going to use? The gospel. What do we find? Some people respond to it, some people don't. So that's why it says, "And afterward I will send for many hunters, and they shall hunt them from every mountain and every hill and out of the holes of the rocks. For my eyes are on all their ways. They are not hidden from my face, nor is their iniquity hidden from my eyes." And if you want to put that in context, ladies and gentlemen, when He says that, He's not talking about the world. He's talking about His people. So get this. The first thing He's going to do is He's going to send the fishermen. But if they don't respond to the fishermen, you know what He's going to send? The hunters, like Nimrod, someone who is a mighty hunter before the Lord. You know, Nimrod was not hunting deer, folks. He was hunting people. He was hunting people, and he was using skillful words. And why is that important? Because it says that Esau was a skillful hunter, that Esau literally knew trapping. Now, here's something to kind of twist your brain a little bit. Look at verse 28. It says that Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his gain, but Rebekah loved Jacob. All right, here's a question I have. How is it that the patriarch of Israel, Isaac, prefers the one that God rejects? Jacob I have loved. Esau I have rejected. And by the way, it's not because God decided, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, I like you, I don't like you. That's not what that means. He rejects Esau because Esau first rejects him. You go back to the story of Cain and Abel. Before Abel is slaughtered by his brother, and they bring these offerings, and Abel offered a more excellent sacrifice than Cain. But Cain's countenance is fallen, and God goes to him and says to him, "Cain, why has your countenance fallen? You know what to do. If you do good, will I not accept your offering as well?" It wasn't that Cain was just disliked by God and born to be bad. Cain rejects God first. And so after God goes to Cain and compels him to do what's right, what does Cain do? Well, he goes up to his brother Abel and says, "Abel, come join me in the field so I can kill you." You think that's the way it worked? No, he set a trap. He lured him out into the field. And how do you think he got him to go out into the field? Words. And then what did he do? Tradition says, as he took a farming tool, some other traditions say a stone, and he bludgeoned his brother to death. In other words, that means he struck him in the head. The head of the righteous seed. But he lured him out there. So going back to Esau, how is it that the patriarch of Israel, the one through whom God is going to propagate this covenant, prefers the one that God rejects? I thought that was an interesting question. Would you like to know my opinion? It says because he ate of his gain. Now, it sounds like in English that the reason that Isaac prefers Esau is because, boy, he can just, his mouth is salivating. But it sounds like that's what it's trying to get across to us. And maybe on one level that is true. But I want you to hear what it says in Hebrew, or what it literally means from Hebrew, when it says that he ate of his game. It says that Isaac loved Esau because game was in his mouth. And the word game there is zaid, which is the same word that I read to you when it says that Esau was a skillful hunter. Yodea zaid, literally knew trapping. In other words, it says that Isaac loved Esau because trapping was in his mouth. Do you understand what I just said? In other words, we've been thinking that the mouth being referred to is Isaac's mouth. But what about the possibility that maybe even in addition to what we thought it was all this time, but what the text is also telling us is that trapping is in Esau's mouth. You see, he is a skillful hunter. He knows how to set a trap. He knows how to set a snare. He knows what to say. The adversary does not come in a red suit and a pitchfork. But what does he come as? Posing as an angel of light. And when he first appears in Genesis 3, what is he using to seduce the woman? Words. Skillful words. Has not God said that you may freely eat of all the trees of the garden? Well, we can eat of all the trees of the garden except the one in the midst of the garden. We're not even to touch it, lest we die. You will not certainly die, which was a lie. It's just that God knows in the day that you eat of the fruit of this tree that you will be like him, knowing good from evil, which it turns out that was true. And so you know what he did? He took something that was true and he mixed it with something that was false. You see, he is the father of lies. And you think about it, every convincing lie is always going to contain a measure of truth. It has to be plausible. It has to sound good. It has to feel good. It has to look good. It will even convince you that this is God. It will sound noble. But what the adversary and those through whom he works isn't telling you is what they've really got in mind. The trap that has been set. And from the beginning, the adversary has used something that appears to be good, because which part of that fruit do you think he showed the woman? He didn't show her the evil part. You see, the adversary is an illusionist. The illusionist wants you looking into this hand. He wants you looking at the handkerchief or whatever it is flashy up here that is intended to catch your eye. And while you're looking at that, and that's the objective, and why does he want you looking in this hand? Because he doesn't want you looking in this one. He doesn't want you looking at what he's really doing over here. I guess I can say this here. We're at a prophecy conference, and I think Joe's okay with this. For the longest time, everybody's saying, look at Rome. Watch Rome. Why? Because he doesn't want you looking at Babylon. Go back to the beginning and find Rome for me in the beginning. Can't do it. You know why? Because it's not there. But go back into the beginning and find Babylon. He's an illusionist, and he wants you looking at what appears to be good, what appears to be God, because he doesn't want you looking at the evil intent. Esau is a skillful hunter. He knows how to set a trap, and apparently was so good at it that his own father was lured into this trap of thinking that Esau is something he really isn't. What it suggests is that Esau was projecting himself to be what he thought his father needed to see. But if he's a goat, that means he's pretending to be a sheep. If he's a tare, then he's pretending to be wheat. If he's of the adversary, he's going to say, I'm a Christian. But Rebekah loved Jacob. Because Rebekah knows something that nobody else knows. Now Jacob cooked a stew, and Esau came in from the field, and he was weary. And Esau said to his brother Jacob, please feed me with that. And here's what it says in Hebrew, ha-adom, ha-edom. The word would be spelled exactly the same as the word Adam or Adam. But it means the red. He craves flesh. He craves those things that pertain to the earthy, carnal nature. Give me some of that hayadom, the red stew. For I am weary. Therefore his name was called Edom. If I took the word Adam in Hebrew and added just one letter, the vav, it would become Edom. He's called Edom for a reason. Because he is representative of this earthy, carnal, desirous nature that has to be satisfied. But Jacob said, sell me your birthright as of this day. And Esau said, look, I'm about to die. Let me ask you this question. Was he going to die? No. But he convinced himself that this carnal appetite is so intense that if I don't eat this stew right now, I'm just going to die. And so, what is this birthright to me? What is it he's referring to? It's the responsibility that goes with being the firstborn to carry on this promise, this covenant that the Creator of the universe has made with Abraham and his seed. And so here's how Esau sees his heritage. It means nothing to me. It means nothing. What is holy, what is sacred, what is precious, and what his father reveres, he abhors and disdains. Hear what I'm saying? Esau hates what his father reveres. Esau despises his heritage. It means nothing to him. It means nothing to him, no more than a bowl of soup. And so Esau is that person's, nation, mentality, whatever words you'd like to insert there, that they will look at the heritage, they will look at what was precious to the fathers and say, that means nothing to me. I have an appetite, it needs to be satisfied right here, right now, or I'm going to die. I hope you're tracking with me here. Because we're not just talking about a man who lived thousands of years ago. We are talking about the beginning so that we can understand what's going on today. Are you with me here? So Jacob says, swear to me as of this day. And so he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and stew of lentils. Then he ate and drank, arose and went his way. Thus Esau despised the birthright. He despised the responsibility that had been handed down to him from his fathers. He traded what was holy for what was profane. After he got through that meal, what's going to happen in a few hours? He's going to be hungry again. And what is he going to be doing? Looking to satisfy that appetite. But what has he got to trade with now? Esau is the one that the most important thing to him, because he's earthy, because he's carnal, the most important thing to him is my appetites being satisfied. And if I have to, I'll set a trap in order that that appetite be satisfied. And he's really, really good at it. Now, let's go on over into chapter 27. And as you know, Rebekah knows something that nobody else knows. And what is that? That even though one is always going to rule over the other, that it's intended from on high that the older one, who is Esau, who is the earthy carnal nature, will serve the younger one. So when she overhears Isaac saying to Esau, go and kill some venison and come back and make me some savory stew such that my soul loves, and then I'm going to bless you before I die. She overhears this and she runs over to Jacob and says, okay, quick. I want you to go out here and I want you to get 2 kids of the goat and I want you to bring them in here and I'm going to make some stew and you're going to take it into your father and you're going to pretend to be Esau so that you will be blessed before he dies. Now, we can go back and forth as to whether or not she should have done it this way, but the point is, she knew something nobody else knew, and time is short. Now, if you read the account, and we won't do that for the sake of time, but you will see that Jacob is resistant to what his mother is saying for him to do, which tells me that it went against his nature to be a deceiver. It went against his nature to be a trickster and a supplanter. In fact, he says, I'm a smooth-skinned man. My brother's a hairy man. Perhaps my father's going to feel me. When he feels me, guess what? I'm going to be found to be a trickster, a deceiver, and I'll bring a curse upon myself. She said, son, you let me worry about that. If there's a curse, I'll take it. You just do what I said. So he goes out, and they take the skins of this goat and put it on Jacob, who was a mild man dwelling in tents, an idiomatic expression for being a shepherd or associated with the sheep. In other words, Esau, who's associated with the goats, has apparently been pretending to be the sheep. And now we've got the guy associated with the sheep. He's going to pretend to be the goats. You see, when we're hanging out with the goats, when we're ceasing to be a light to the nations, and we start acting like the nations, it's going to be really hard for people out there to distinguish the sheep from the goats. Because when you let the goats in, when you let your guard down and let the goats or let the tares in, before long, guess what? The sheep start acting like the goats. We've got a culture right now of goats, but you know what they're doing? They're putting a lot of pressure on his people to act like them, and guess what's happening among many of his people? They're starting to act like them instead of saying, no, not going to do that. And so you've got a lot of sheep that look like goats, which makes me wonder if that hasn't got something to do with when Messiah returns, he has to separate the sheep from the goats. We cannot be a light to the nations if we are acting like the nations. So he goes in, you know the story, and if you read it, it's obvious that Isaac is a little suspicious. Are you really my son Esau? I am. And Isaac says something very strange to me. In verse 21 and 2, he says, in chapter 27, he says, Isaac said to Jacob, please come near that I may feel you, my son, whether you are really my son Esau or not. So Jacob went near to Isaac his father, and he felt him and said, the voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. Now, that might just be something as simple as saying that, you know, you sound like my son Jacob, but I felt your hands and they feel like Esau's. But maybe there's something else being hinted at here. And to see that, we have to look at verse 20. Isaac said to his son, how is it that you have found it so quickly, my son? And he said, because the Lord your God brought it to me. In other words, when he says the voice is Jacob's, maybe he's saying, you speak, your words are the words of Jacob, but you feel like Esau. What's coming out of your mouth sounds like Jacob, but why do you look, feel, and even smell like Esau? I ain't got time to develop that. Did I? So he goes on and he blesses him. He blesses Jacob, which that is what was supposed to happen anyway. The birthright and the blessing had been deemed to, or had been given to Jacob when he was still in his mother's womb. You see, Esau thinks that Jacob has something that was never Esau's in the first place. But at any rate, Jacob leaves, and it says that almost immediately Esau comes in from the field. He prepares the stew, and then he goes into his father. In verse 32, it says, and his father Isaac said to him, who are you? And so he said, I am your son, your firstborn, Esau. Then Isaac trembled exceedingly and said, where's the one who hunted game and brought it to me? I ate all of it before you came, and I have blessed him, and indeed he shall be blessed. And when Esau heard the words of his father, he cried with an exceedingly great and bitter cry and said to his father, bless me also, O my father. But he said, your brother came with deceit and has taken away your blessing. That's true. Jacob did come with deceit. There is no arguing that. And Isaac knows it now. Isaac knows that Jacob came with deceit and has taken away the blessing. Verse 36. And Esau said, is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and now look, he has taken away my blessing. What's wrong with that statement? It's a lie. But like every convincing lie, it contains a measure of truth. Because Isaac is well aware that Jacob, by deceit, has obtained the blessing. But there is no reason for us to believe, based on what is in the text, that Isaac knows the particulars of how Jacob obtained the birthright. So you see how very clever and very shrewd and how good at setting a snare Esau really is. He seizes upon the opportunity to take something that Isaac knows to be the truth and then says something that isn't true to try to convince his father that it is true. He spins a web and he makes this accusation. You rightly named him Yaakov because he has supplanted me. There are a lot of people, a lot of Christians, there are a lot of rabbis that are still under the spell of Esau's words because they still think that Jacob means supplanter. And this is my heart's belief. That, ladies and gentlemen, is at the heart of why so many so-called Christians will stand up in support of the Palestinians and call the Israelis the occupiers, the aggressors, and call for the end to Israeli apartheid because they're still under the spell of this notion that Yaakov is a supplanter. That means that Israel is a supplanter, a trickster, a deceiver. He's the enemy. They're the ones that crucified the Lord anyway. They're all about being a trickster. They're all under the spell of Esau. And I feel Pentecostal right now. After taking all this abuse. But I hope you're hearing what I'm saying. I hope you're seeing what I'm trying to lay out for you. That Esau, he blends in with the environment. He doesn't want he doesn't want you to see him for what he really is. He wants to project this idea that I'm the one who's harmed. I'm the one who's been injured. I'm the one who's been supplanted. I'm the one who's been deceived. And in fact, here's what's going on. He's accusing his brother of what he is guilty of. He's the trickster. He's the deceiver. He's the one who's skillful at setting a snare. I am. Look what's going on in the world right now, people. Look what's about to happen in just the next couple of weeks. Esau knows trapping. Here's my belief. The snare is being set right now. Not just for the nation of Israel, but this is global at this point, ladies and gentlemen. A snare is being set for God's people all over the world. And it's very skillful, and it's done through words, and it's about giving you what you want and offering what, and saying what you need to hear and putting something out there that looks all nice and shiny and looks good because they don't want you looking in this hand. He's a skillful hunter. And look at how he responds to the knowledge that he's lost the blessing. Verse 37, then Isaac answered and said to Esau, indeed, I have made him your master and all his brethren. I have given to him as servants. With grain and wine I have sustained him. And what shall I do for you now, my son? And Esau said to his father, have you only one blessing, my father? Bless me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and he wept. He's upset. He's distraught. He's beside himself because he's lost the stuff. Because he's lost what he thinks belongs to him. The stuff, the herds, the flocks, the material blessing that goes along with being the son of Isaac. Compare that to how he responded to the responsibility that went along with being the son of Isaac. You see, he wanted the blessing, but he didn't want the responsibility. But you see, you don't have the blessing until you embrace the responsibility. See, there's only one way that leads to life, and few there are that find it. It is a straight gate, is a narrow passageway. In fact, that word can mean troublesome. It's not fun. If it was fun, everybody would be doing it. If it was fun to have a prophecy conference, but I also want you to see that that road that leads to life is the one and only road that leads to blessing. Because I set before you today blessings and curses, life and death. I would that you choose life. But in choosing life, you're also choosing blessing. So Esau wants the blessing, he wants the stuff, but he doesn't want the responsibility that goes along with it. Help me, Lord, say this the right way. Esau wants free contraception, but he doesn't want the responsibility to go out and work. Esau wants his iPad, his iPod, he wants his internet, he wants all that kind of stuff. He wants health care, he wants all the benefits. He wants all the blessings that are associated with being in this prosperous land, but he doesn't want the responsibility that has been handed down to him by his fathers. He cares nothing for the heritage. In fact, he abhors the heritage of his fathers. He hates those things that his father reveres. He despises where he came from. He just wants the stuff. And when he can't get the stuff, he goes on a rampage and he says, as soon as my father is buried, I'm going to kill Jacob. Esau, ladies and gentlemen, is alive and well. That mindset, that mentality, I want the stuff, but I don't want the responsibility. Ladies and gentlemen, say what you will about the founding fathers of this nation, but as it was pointed out very clearly, very plainly yesterday, even though they were imperfect men, because there's none righteous, no, not one, yet they believed in perfect principles. And those perfect principles are contained in this book. And so what we really have going on, ladies and gentlemen, is not so much an attack on the Constitution of the United States. It goes beyond that. It's an attack on this book right here. That's what it's all about. And so all this nonsense about we're the 99%, occupy this and occupy that. You know why they're occupying Wall Street? Because his people haven't been occupying. Because we let our guard down, we let the goats in, we let the tares in, we started acting like the tares, we started acting like the goats, and now we're paying for it. I got one more thing to share with you. And all of this is just to really kind of set up what we want to discuss tonight. Because we needed to understand these things so that when I show you some things, some facts and figures and reality of what's going on right now, then hopefully you're going to see the connection. But now look back over here into chapter 27. He laments losing the stuff. He cares nothing about the heritage, about the birthright. And here's what Isaac says in response to Esau's plea for a blessing. Verse 39. Behold, your dwelling shall be of the fatness of the earth and of the dew of heaven from above. Verse 40. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. And it shall come to pass when you become restless. And maybe your translation words it a little bit differently, but it says, when you become restless, then you shall break his yoke from your neck. Whose yoke from his neck? Jacob's yoke. When you become restless, you will break Jacob's yoke from your neck. What is Isaac saying? Because remember, they're not going to coexist. They're not going to rule side by side. One's always going to be ruling over the other. By the way, globally, when you look at the world today, who do you think's in control? Jacob or Esau? All right? But in the end, the older shall serve the younger, because when Messiah comes back, Esau's done. Right? But up until that time, there is this contest going back and forth. And so here's what Isaac said to Esau, and I'm just going to put it in plain English. You're going to live by your sword. He's going to be sustained with grain and wine and all the fatness of the earth, but you're going to live by your sword. But if you are grieved, if you have a grievance, then you will have the opportunity to break his yoke from your neck. And what would the inference in that statement be? And then you'll have the opportunity to put your yoke on his neck. Let's put it this way. He has the birthright. He has the blessing. And as long as he is walking worthy of that birthright and that blessing, you will serve him. But if he ever starts acting like you, if you have a grievance, if he's not walking worthy of that birthright and blessing, going back to what we said yesterday, if he's not where he's supposed to be, doing what he's designed to do, if he's not being salt, if he's not being light, then you'll have a grievance, Esau, and then you will break his yoke from your neck, and you will have the opportunity to put your yoke on his neck. And so I submit to you folks that globally, Esau's kind of running the show, so to speak. But I want to look a little bit more specifically at this nation. It is my opinion, firmly so, adamantly so, that in the last few months specifically, we could go back years, we could even go back decades, but it's very visible, it's very in very dramatic fashion. I believe with my whole heart that what we're seeing going on in this nation, Esau is breaking the yoke off his neck. And if he is breaking the yoke from his neck, what does he intend to do? He intends to put the yoke upon Jacob's neck. And if that is happening, why is it happening? Why would the Creator, why would our Father in heaven allow Esau to break Jacob's yoke from off his neck and allow Esau to put his yoke on Jacob's neck? I can only think of one thing. Number one, Esau has a grievance. It's because Jacob hasn't been, his people have not been doing what they were supposed to be doing. And if he's going to allow Esau to put a yoke on his people's neck, it's going to drive them to their knees. Because it does not say, if those people who are not called by my name, but my people, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves, will seek my face and pray and turn from their wicked ways. And remember, wickedness doesn't have to be rape, murder, mayhem. All it has to be is not being where you're supposed to be, not doing what you're supposed to be doing, not being salt, not being light. Remember, if salt loses its saltiness, it's tossed out and what? Trampled under the heel. That's what I think is going on, folks. And tonight, I'm going to show you some things that are going to back this up. But I'll leave you with this. That is not for us to lose heart, because our Father is sovereign. And there is nothing He does, there's nothing He allows to happen that it is not in the best interest of His people. He says, Nebuchadnezzar is my servant. Nebuchadnezzar destroyed Jerusalem and razed the temple, carried temple treasures off into Babylon, put them in the house of his God. But why did he do that? To bring his people to their knees, to bring them to humility, to bring them to repentance, and in repentance bring them to restoration.